how the reality TV show Survivor mirrors entrepreneurship. We've heard the saying, life imitates art. But in this case, I'm going to argue that art imitates life. The reality TV show Survivor, basically the idea, most people know it, a bunch of different castaways that don't know each other all go to a remote island in Fiji, and they have to survive on basically nothing. Very little food, very few resources, and they compete in challenges. And then there's a social element of the game where each tribal council, after each challenge, they vote somebody out. And the idea is who can get to the very end, who can survive both the physical demands, the social aspects of it, and the gameplay in order to be able to survive and win. And, this is a show that's been on for 46 seasons, and the ratings are still really, really high because there's something fascinating about it. A lot of reality shows come and go. A lot of reality shows might have a lot of interest in the very beginning, and then they sort of wane because they get repetitive. Despite the fact that there are minor changes and upgrades in Survivor every single season, for the most part, the game is largely the same. But the players themselves have evolved quite a bit because they've watched it all back on TV. And there's something fascinating each and every time because all the players are unique. So the dynamics are unique. They repeat, and you see some of the same dynamics play out, but because they're new individuals every single time, there's something really fascinating about it because the social element combined with all the other elements and how it's a game, yet it mirrors life in so many other ways, makes it fascinating. It has an amazing symmetry with life of an entrepreneur. As I was watching it, I love the show, and I've watched it since one of the early seasons, not the very beginning. And I was watching the finale from this last season 46 the other night, and I realized how closely being a castaway on the island resembles being an entrepreneur. In fact, I think that there are 8 specific parallels that we could draw that really illuminate the skill set that we need to succeed in business. And they're exactly the same as the skills needed to win the game. But first, before we jump right into that, I have to give a shout out to Kenzie for winning this season. And actually the entire cast this time. I thought everybody was really great. But in particular, I want to recognize Kenzie because I love Charlie, and I thought Ben in the finals were great too. But the fact of the matter is, here's a woman who basically cared about everybody else and, worried about making sure everybody felt comfortable. And she consoled people and made them feel better when they were hurting, even though they're her competitors. And as it turns out in her speech at the end, we find out that that's the way her normal life is also. She runs a hair salon where she doesn't make any money because she only makes the money from the haircuts she does herself. All the chairs in her place she gives away for free so other people can make a living. And, to have somebody that's selfless and that giving, have something good happen where they win and have it paid back to them is so gratifying. It's so validating as a human being and good for her for doing things the right way. It's no disrespect to the other candidates, but, here's someone who's spent her life in service to other people. So it's just a wonderful feel-good story to know that she got it paid back to her as well. And so I just couldn't have been happier with the way that it all turned out. And so, let's talk about the 8 traits and skills specifically that the castaways need in order to win the game, and how those same 8 traits are the things that we need as entrepreneurs to be able to succeed. The first of them is resource management. In Survivor, the contestants essentially get very little. In fact, this season they didn't even get rice. So they have very limited resources. They don't have very much food at all, unless they win challenges. There's some fruit that they can collect. Maybe they can fish. Maybe they find some crabs and stuff like that. Their shelter, they basically have to make a shelter with a machete and hack down some palm fronds and stuff like that. And then they also have to create alliances, but everybody there is there to win the game. So it's very difficult because you never know really who you can trust. So much like entrepreneurs, right, we have to manage limited resources. Very few of us are in a situation where we just have unlimited capital. Well, I'm just doing this as a hobby, and if it fails, I'll just inject more money, no big deal. Most of us are in a situation where this is our, this is our career, this is our vocation, this is the way we make money. And so if we can't generate enough capital, then we don't eat. And we certainly don't have extra capital to waste. And so it becomes a real challenge, in terms of where to put it, but also how to generate enough. Another resource that is usually scarce among entrepreneurs is manpower. We don't usually have a lot of other people we can rely on. We might outsource, we have a small team, but unlike a big company or a company that has lots of employees, we don't have a specific person with each individual job description. We roll up the sleeves and do whatever needs to be done. And then of course there's always time. Since the beginning of business, entrepreneurs have struggled with time management because having a work-life balance is really difficult. In order to be successful, we have to plunge ourselves all in on our entrepreneurial venture and on our business. That necessarily means we don't have the same amount of time to spend with our family, to spend with our friends, to do stuff that we want to do. But the idea in general is that it's an investment that later we get paid back, and hopefully that equation shifts, where all the people we knew that were working still have to work to make money, and maybe we can step back a little bit and enjoy the fruits of our labor and have to work less over time. And so, there's trade-offs there, but there's eerie parallels between Survivor contestants with scarce resources and entrepreneurs. The second parallel is strategy and planning, right? Both Survivor contestants and entrepreneurs have to strategize. We have to plan and be able to navigate complex environments. On Survivor, they're constantly shifting between different challenges, different conditions, changing moods, changing opinions, changing relationships. There are changes within the game and within people. Obviously, when we're dealing with people in general, it's a little unpredictable because human beings have a tendency to be that way. Contestants plan their own gameplay to be able to outwit others, but they have to do it in a way where others don't recognize it. Otherwise, they could end up being voted out. And entrepreneurs have to plan business strategies to be able to outperform competitors. So it's really, really tricky because we're in a situation where, the strategic planning has to be both short-term, right? In Survivor, you have to make it to the next vote. If you don't make it through the tribal council, you go home no matter how good your plans are. And as an entrepreneur, we've got to make it through this quarter, this year, whatever, and be able to, pay the bills and make enough to be able to keep going. So in both particular cases, the strategy and the planning definitely comes into play. We have to be able to think short term to get through what we need to get through, and we have to be able to think longer term so we don't sacrifice the long term just to make it go in the short term. It's a balancing act, and it makes it really, really difficult. The third parallel is risk-taking. So in Survivor, it's all about taking risks. I mean, every alliance that you try to form, every conversation you have, you never know whether it's going to blow up in your face. You don't know whether people are going to be honest with you. When you are hunting for hidden immunity idols, you have to be really careful because if people see that you're hunting for it, then you become a target. And in recent seasons, if anybody finds out that you have one, you become a big target. So those people are always on the chopping block because everybody wants to get rid of them. Nobody wants that power still left in the game. There's also the risk-taking about when to play the immunity idol. In this particular season, there were 4 tribals in a row where somebody went home with an idol in their pocket. They felt as though they could save it for one more day, and that's understandable because it gives you that power. So you get a little greedy and you feel like, well, if I could just hold on to it one more time, I know I'm safe at the next one too. But if other people know that you have it, or if there's a groundswell to get rid of you and you don't know it, then you can go home with it in your pocket. As entrepreneurs, we also have to constantly assess and take calculated risks in order to be able to innovate and grow our business. So whether or not we launch that marketing campaign, whether we invest in that new advertising strategy, whether we partner with this other particular business or other venture, whether we launch this new product line. I remember reading the story about how Porsche, the car company, when they rolled out their SUV, which now are everywhere, at the time when they were thinking about rolling it out, they basically bet the entire business on it. From what I understand, it was such a financial commitment to build an SUV that was worthy of their name. They had to invest so much that had that SUV failed, it possibly would have bankrupted the company. That was how big of a gamble they took on it. But they knew all these other luxury car companies were coming out with SUVs, and they didn't want to get left behind and be the car company. And so they took the risk, and it actually worked. In some cases it does, in other cases it doesn't. And as entrepreneurs, we have to do that all the time. We have to decide. We have limited resources, limited attention, limited time. So we have to make decisions. And every decision we make to take a risk somewhere means we're foregoing all the other options. And that will either turn out to be a prophetically good decision or potentially prophetically fatal. So we just never know. And that is the nature of taking risks. It can be fun, it can be exciting and exhilarating, but it can also be terrifying because obviously everybody wants to be able to stay in business, and it's not always easy to do that if we have to take big risks. The fourth trait or parallel between survivor and entrepreneurship is adaptability and resilience. It's kind of two, I guess, in one, but whatever. The ability to adapt to changing circumstances and rebound from setbacks, right? That is, number one on Survivor. We see it all the time where people break down, they get stripped down to their core, and they cry, and people at home think, I would never cry on the show. I don't understand it. It's hard to describe if you have never been in a situation where you've literally been, had everything in your life stripped away from you. But I can relate on some levels, and there's no question it would be an emotional and a really difficult time to get through. And some people are more equipped for it than others, and some are not. But the winners, the people that survive and go on and thrive, often end up persevering through that and look back at that as growth because they see the fact that they adapted. They went from a circumstance where they thought that they couldn't handle it anymore. They stuck through it, they kept going, and at the end, they come out much stronger for it. And so the ability to adapt and the ability to be resilient and not let those things defeat you. You lose challenge after challenge after challenge. In this last season, the one team, I think, lost 5 challenges in a row. The whole team, tribe, was completely decimated. They were so distraught, but they didn't let that defeat them. And when 2 of them end up sitting at the end, it's remarkable because the fact of the matter is, it means not only did they survive, but they actually thrived based on, despite that. And that's really powerful. Those traits are super important in Survivor because there are always changes. Your alliance members get voted out. You get left out of a vote, and then you realize, oh no, I'm on the bottom. It's a constant evolution. It's a constant juggling of what's going on. And it's a constant adaptation to the new rules and the new circumstances that emerge after every single tribal council. Entrepreneurship is exactly the same thing. We have to be able to quickly pivot strategies in response to new challenges. I talked about in another episode when COVID hit and the restaurant industry in my area. We have a lot of restaurants, and some of the restaurants really struggled because they didn't really adapt fast enough. They weren't prepared, which that makes sense. Who's going to think that there's going to be a pandemic that's going to shut them down? But they also didn't act quickly enough once they realized this was an existential threat. Others pivoted, adapted, had a burgeoning takeout business, made the takeout process so much easier, and ironically ended up with a competitive advantage because instead of competing with all the other restaurants that they already were, they were only competing with the other ones who also adapted. The ones who didn't adapt were basically shuttered until they could figure it out. And so it ironically ended up making them that way. In addition to that, the resilience comes into play there too, because as entrepreneurs, we always deal with challenges and setbacks. It's part of the package. And so I've been through in my own business, I've been through a couple of, I went through an industry meltdown where literally I was right at the top of the heap. I was just like cresting the top of the mountain. And literally a month later, the entire bottom fell out of the industry that I was in. And I had to rebuild from scratch. It took 2.5 to 3 years to start all over and rebuild it. I've had a situation where, situation after situation where there were circumstances outside of my control that I had no ability to affect, and I had to just keep going. I had to have that resilience, and I had to say, how can I adapt to this and make this work for me? The fifth parallel is networking and alliances. Building strong alliances is a key on Survivor. It doesn't matter what a challenge beast you are or whatever else. If you don't have alliances, you will eventually go home. You can no longer go through it as sort of a solo player, not that you ever really could, but now more so than ever, because alliances form and they vote out people based on strength and vote out people based on, outside people that are outside the alliance. And so even if you're self-sufficient and very good on your own, you'll only last so long if you don't have friends. You need your alliance to be able to keep ears on the ground, know what the general sentiment is of the tribe, where the votes are going. So you have an opportunity to be able to make some changes, make some adaptations, and figure out how to survive. Those alliances keep you going and can save you in a number of situations. In entrepreneurship, it's really exactly the same. One of my biggest regrets as an entrepreneur is that I didn't network enough early on. I waited until much later in the game. I was sort of a lone wolf doing my own thing, and I had a lot of stuff to do all the time. So I deprioritized all of the networking, all the relationship building, and I paid for it. Because some of the circumstances I found myself in where I was struggling, had I just had that network, I would have been able to rebound a lot faster. I also might have been able to foresee more of the issues because I would have been more connected with other people. So we have to network. We have to build relationships. And those relationships can support and advance our business goals because they can keep us abreast of what's going on. They can give us quicker answers to problems that we need to solve because other people have been through it. They can give us opportunities for synergy and growth by partnering and other things. And they can give us a lot of additional strategies that maybe we didn't think of. But they also are going to give us a sanity check. When we have ideas, when we're worried about the economy or this or that or industry trends or technology, we can check our sanity about our ideas with other people and see, are we overreacting? Are we in our own head? Or is this real? Are other people seeing the same thing? So that's a really powerful reason to have those connections. The sixth parallel is leadership and influence. Effective leadership and the ability to influence others are important in both Survivor and entrepreneurship. On Survivor, we don't necessarily need to lead an alliance, but we need to have enough leadership and likability there and respect that, we're able to get other people to align with us to do what we want them to do. It's not about ordering people around or telling them what to do. Those people might have survived in the early seasons. Nowadays, those people get voted out because nobody likes them. It's more about having the gravitas and having the influence based on the fact that, you're a quality player who builds quality relationships and contributes in a positive way to what's going on. Strong leadership is the same thing in a company's success, right? Even if we don't have employees, we need leadership so we know the vision, we know where we're going, and we can chart the path to get there, make adjustments as we need to make sure we stay on course. And obviously, if we have a team, we have to be able to lead by example and show them how to do it as well. The seventh thing that we need, and the seventh parallel, is psychological endurance. Survivor contestants and entrepreneurs have to cope with high stress, uncertainty, psychological strain, and the ability somehow to be able to maintain focus and determination under pressure. We're under a lot of pressure all the time. On the show, they're completely deprived. I'm somebody who, when I don't eat, I get very bad headaches, I start vomiting. So I'm acutely aware of what a body in deprivation is like. And I have infinite respect for people who can go on the show and solve a puzzle and remember like 3 sets of 2-digit numbers. Because as simple as those things are in a normal everyday life, in the pressure of a contest, when you haven't eaten, you're exhausted, you're completely depleted, has got to be really difficult. And the physical exhaustion out in the heat in Fiji, trying to do these challenges also has to be absolutely exhausting. And so the focus and determination under pressure is really astounding and really admirable. And as entrepreneurs, we're the same thing. We have days where the chips are down. We have days where they're make or break. We have real stress. And for us, it's not even a game. For us, if we don't make it go, sometimes we don't have enough money to pay our bills, right? So it's super important that we're able to maintain our focus and determination, because when things go bad, that's when we need to be as focused and determined as ever. We can't be someone who cracks under the pressure. And the eighth thing is competition and a winning mentality. Both fields involve intense competition and require a strong desire to win. You know, if we want to be successful on Survivor, we have to go in with the idea that we want to win. We're not just going in to play. If we want to start a business, we have to go in with the idea that we're going to do whatever it takes to make this succeed. If we're just kicking the tires and testing it out, the odds of success are almost zero. This mentality drives contestants and entrepreneurs alike to push boundaries and strive for success no matter what the circumstances are. By drawing parallels between the gameplay in Survivor and the challenges of entrepreneurship, we can see how the skills and traits that are valuable in the show can also be crucial in the business world. So the takeaway here is that I like finding lessons in everyday life that relate back to business, because I think it's a valuable way to learn when we're entertained at the same time. You know, sometimes it's easier to absorb things when we do them in the context of fun or entertainment than it is when we're just, set out to focus on skills development itself. The better that we understand the business and entrepreneurship game, right, the more equipped we can make ourselves to succeed in it.